Well, welcome everyone so much to this. Oh, Jeff is sideways, but it's okay. To this ABNY YP policy brief on the New York State budget. My name is Sarah Samuels. I'm the Programs and Communications Manager here at ABNY. And before I kick it off to our amazing YP host, just remember to spread the word at A Better NY and all social media channels. And now I'm going to kick it to Deborah Maribal, who's a vice president at the Carlisle Group and a member of our Young Professional Steering Committee, to do introductions. So thanks all for coming, and thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. As Sarah mentioned, I am a proud member of the ABNY Young Professional Steering Committee since last year. And before I introduce our speakers, I quickly wanted to invite you all to join next week's ABNY YP Associates launch celebration and open house, which is taking place next Thursday, May 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute at Hunter College. You should all have received an invite via email, and if not, you can find additional information on the abny.org events page. And just a quick background on the ABNY YP Associates. It's a new membership structure for the ABNY Young Professionals program and is designed to provide an additional level of engagement for members of the ABNY YP Network. We really hope you can join us for the launch event next week. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Rebecca Lewis and her colleague and moderator today, Jeff Coltin. Rebecca is a senior state politics reporter at City and State, where she covers all things Albany. Before joining City and State, Ms. Lewis worked for the public radio station WFUV in a variety of roles, including reporter, anchor, and podcast producer. A native of New York, she graduated from Fordham University and now lives in Washington Heights. Jeff is the City Hall Bureau Chief for City and State New York, where he focuses on Eric Adams' administration and city politics and elections. He started with the company as an intern in 2014 and has also worked for New York One and WFUV News. Born and raised in Phoenix, Mr. Coltin attended Fordham University in the Bronx and now lives on Manhattan's Upper West Side. And with that, I will pass it on to our speaker.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Rebecca and I met in college and we worked together there. And now we work together at City and State. It's a fantastic situation. I'm sorry. Unfortunate situation. I'm sorry to be late and on a phone, and I'm just flabbergasted today. My Zoom was downloading on my computer, and I'm coming at you from the spotty City Hall Wi-Fi here in City Hall. So I'm doing my best, but luckily you're not here to hear from me. You're here to hear from my wonderful protege and mentee, and I'll say other condescending terms, Rebecca Lewis, because she knows about the budget. I don't know anything, so I'm here to learn just like the rest of you. So thank you for giving us some time to learn. And Rebecca, the budget, it passed like, I guess we're almost 2 months ago. Well, really a month and a half because it was so late. Give us the big top line. Like, what's if you didn't know anything about the state budget, if you're just a New Yorker, like, what is the highlight of this year's state budget?
Bail. That is the top line, which is funny because it's not actually budget related, but it wound up being the biggest budget item. It caused the budget to be late by about a week. It upended all of the negotiations, and it is now something that will continue to be part of the various campaigns going into June or August, for that matter. Honestly, top line, it's bail, and I suppose if you're looking at a fiscal standpoint, the top line is it is once again the largest state budget in New York history. Just over $220 billion. So still big spending, a lot of COVID cash that wasn't spent last year or the year before. A lot of investments, higher than expected tax returns, tax revenue. So, the state's doing pretty good. And so bail and record-breaking spending.
Now, again, bail, I mean, why should if that's not a budget issue, then why is it in the budget? I hope I'm not talking down to our audience here, many of you who work in city and state politics and follow this stuff, but you know, why does like non-budget line stuff always get crammed into the budget?
Well, it all goes back to Robert Moses. I'm kidding, although it kind of does. The state budget is definitely different than the city budget, which I am always confused by, because I don't know where to find anything in the city budget. The state budget, I at least know where things are, but we have spending bills, and we have what are called Article 7 bills, which is ostensibly legislation necessary for the enactment of the budget, but really you can put just about anything you want in there, regardless of if it's necessary to enact the budget. So what that has historically meant is that the governor, who has enormous power in the budget process, will shoehorn in whatever kind of priorities they want in the part of session where they have control over, well, not control over, but more control over the legislative process. And we really saw that ramp up under Cuomo. You know, other governors have done it, but not to the extent that Cuomo has. So even though we do have a lot of spending, we have our, you know, fiscal bills, our spending bills, which are written very, very differently than plain legislative language and statute. There is page after page after page of things that are not really related to the budget. So that's how we got criminal justice reform, bail reform, I believe, originally in 2019. That's where we got public campaign financing for the state level. That's where Cuomo wanted to get marijuana legalization done, which at least you can say that that does have a fiscal impact, even though it's a huge regulatory issue that arguably should not be shoehorned into an already very large and contentious series of documents. So long story short, the state budget is just the excuse for the governor to do what the governor wants. And lawmakers try to push back, and you know, what we get is a lot of well, what we get is the big ugly, the bill at the end of negotiations, where everything that was not included in other bills that have been debated and negotiated and talked about until the very last minute get all smushed together into one bill. It's usually the revenue bill, but this year I believe it was ALPHA, the education. You know what? I do not remember what ALPHA stands for because I just call it ALPHA. But it was the education bill, was the one that had all the good stuff.
Labor, farming, yeah. Now wait a second. We have a new governor this year. I was under the impression that this would be a new era of transparency and goodwill in Albany, and that everybody would be holding hands and dancing in a circle and in total agreement. Has that not happened with this year? Was anything different about this year's budget from the past 12 years of Cuomo?
Well, it started out different based on conversations I've had with lawmakers. They said that the governor was attentive, that she, you know, really took time to listen to various members, that they had more conversations during this one budget with her and her staff than with Cuomo at any point during his decade in office. So, oh, two Jeffs. It did start out a little bit different, and certainly the legislature tried to flex its influence a little bit more, especially Speaker Carl Hastie was very adamant about not having any non-budgetary legislation in the budget. That obviously did not happen. But that all changed very quickly when the governor's bail reform plan leaked to the New York press. Lawmakers were very unhappy with that. They did not like how, well, even legislative leaders had not seen that plan before it leaked to the press. And once it was out there, I've heard from numerous lawmakers who said that lines of negotiation basically just cut off. that there was no discussion on anything until they can come to an agreement on bail. And that really just put a huge damper on things. Add to that the Buffalo Bills stadium deal, which also came as a surprise to legislative leaders and rank and file members alike, really kind of soured what had been overall a fairly positive working relationship. Now, at the end of the day, it's still, most lawmakers will still say it was better than dealing with Cuomo because he would just not talk to them at all. But there was a lot of unhappiness with how things ended up in the budget process, and certainly was no less secretive. Multiple good government advocates have said that this is among the most secretive budget processes that they've ever seen. That's not just on Hochul, that's also on the legislature and legislative leaders, but everyone was really kind of keeping things tied up tight, not really letting things get out unless you're, the governor's people and it's the bail reform plan. But it was definitely different than under Cuomo, but a lot of things stayed the same, and not least of which is the governor pushing for their agenda in the part of the year that they have the most power.
Now, I'm biased as a journalist and your colleague. You mentioned about the impact of the leaking of the bail reform framework. I'm actually interested in if you could expand on that. Like, what role does the press play in the budget, and what got in and what got out? How much are you and maybe in particular our illustrious colleagues at the New York Post helping to shape how the money gets spent in the state?
I think that you're perhaps giving us too much credit. Honestly, I don't know how much the press really shapes what goes on. We do our best to find out what's going on, find out why things are happening, make that public. Certainly with, the expanded healthcare for undocumented immigrants, which was a topic that I covered quite a lot, got information out there. Ultimately, it didn't make it in. Despite lawmakers' best efforts, and despite both lawmakers and advocates' confidence that it was going to make it in. About just a few days before it officially fell out, I had people telling me we're planning to go up and it's a celebration. We're planning to go up and celebrate. We are expecting it to pass. And it didn't. A very, very scaled back version for people over 65 was approved, but not nearly to the level that advocates and lawmakers wanted to see it included. So, I was not saying that advocating one way or the other for its inclusion, but in the end, having all that information out there did not seem to influence the governor's opinion of it, because at the end of the day, I was told it was ultimately the governor and her saying that it would cost too much money. Having that info out in the public didn't seem to really influence her too much. Perhaps it did a little bit with the 65 and over provision that was included. But I think it's a little bit presumptuous to think that any member of the press is having an influence on the budget negotiations behind closed doors. But that being said, having something so major leak to the public, I'm sure did have an impact on negotiations, perhaps not because of anything in particular that the press did, but because it soured the relationship between those who were negotiating. So, long story short, I don't think we're that important, but I think that in terms of what makes it in and out of the budget, but certainly for our readers to try to illuminate this process that's generally wrapped up in shadows as much as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Now, there are some parts of the budget that the politicians, that legislative leaders and the governor really want to be made public. It's stuff like addressing inflation, that they can go to their voters in June or August or November, whenever they're getting reelected, and say, oh, we addressed inflation, we addressed crime. We can go back to bail reform, and I'm sure we will. But as for inflation, wasn't there like a little something sprinkled into the budget?
There was a moratorium on the gas tax that was going to go through, I believe, December, but potentially a little bit longer. That was fairly contentious. I think that at that point, the issues with inflation were not, well, they were prominent, but not quite as prominent as they have become in the past month and a half. But rising gas prices was something that was of great concern to a lot of constituents. There was debate on the best way to handle that. A lot of lawmakers did not think that a moratorium on the gas tax was the best way to go, but ultimately that is what made it into the budget. Another thing, you can go home and tell your constituents, hey, you're paying less at the pump now because we passed this as part of the budget, regardless of what other lawmakers or environmental advocates or anyone who might have been opposed to it could say. Pocketbook issues are still, one of the most important things to your average voter who might not be paying attention to, the nitty gritty of. I'm trying to think of something specifically nitty gritty that the average voter wouldn't care about, but I can't think of anything because I'm so involved in it.
Who is the average voter?
The nitty gritty of the funding for the dormitory authority, let's say.
Nice. Okay. Our next ABNY YP interview, I'm going to go to a diner in the North Country, and I'm going to interview the people there about what they felt about the state budget, and we'll learn what the real people think. But I am interested in particular, one person's thoughts on the budget, and that's Eric Adams. For all of us like myself who are a little more city focused, how'd the mayor do? This is his first year. He wanted to come in swinging.
He did not do so great in the budget. He was almost a non-presence in Albany. It almost seemed like a point of pride for some reason for him to not visit Albany. And I think he's been up twice, maybe 3 times in person. And one of those times was just this week. So twice, yeah. Twice, which is, not the
One's
best
virtually,
way.
I believe, in addition, but yeah.
Which is not really the best way to get lawmakers on your side. Certainly a lot of people expected him to come in and know how to handle Albany, how to get what he needs, because he is a former state senator himself, but didn't happen. He did not really seem to put that much effort into getting his budget priorities until maybe the very last minute. Those included the extension of mayoral control. He got Kathy Hochul on his side. Even had her commit to 4 years, a 4-year extension, but that fell out of the budget. Didn't get the renewal of 421A, the controversial tax break for developers to build affordable housing. He didn't get an expansion of red light and speed cameras for the city. So he did get some tweaks to bail, which were among his priorities, but he still felt that it did not go far enough. It did not quite do everything that he felt needed to be changed with bail. So all in all, he didn't really turn out that well. And he's now desperately, well, maybe not desperately, but he is madly lobbying. He and his staff are madly lobbying lawmakers in the last few days of session to try to get some of those priorities that he hoped to get done in the budget done before everyone goes home for summer vacation.
I wish you luck on reporting and interpreting what the replacement for 421A ends up being.
If there is one. We did in the last time it was up for renewal, it did lapse for about a year. So no guarantee that it will get renewed, or at least not right now. Okay. Although if anyone who is a housing wonk remembers from the budget, 485W was the governor's proposal to replace it, which is more political jargon for something that was essentially a slightly tweaked version of 421A, but we'll see what lawmakers want to do. There's not a ton of appetite for that, but you know, it's been floated to me that good cause and 421A replacement could be paired, but that seems highly unlikely at this point.
I do hope that whatever happens, they think of a catchier name than 421A or 485W. Sometimes it's fun for us to, you know, speak with our jargon, but like I feel like you know, that guy at the diner in the North Country is like, what the hell are you talking about with 421A? So,
Although you do know that they do actually have real names, real program names.
oh yeah? Oh, we never
Yeah.
call it that. Oh.
No, we don't, including 485W. It has a affordable, it's AANY, I think, affordable something of New York. And when Cuomo passed the new one back in, I think, 2016, 2017, he also rebranded it as like affordable New York program or something. So they do actually have names. We just don't call them by those names.
Okay, yeah. I think I remember that now. I guess it's, I mean, like Obamacare, that sticks because it's like a good catchy name, but you know, 421A, crazy. This is a reminder, by the way, that I am going to ask Rebecca like a couple more questions, and then we would love to open this up to the audience to ask some questions yourselves. I don't know if we're going to do that specifically. I think just in the Q&A function on Zoom. I think that's the best way to do it. So please start submitting your questions. And I can go from there. But other things I wanted to ask myself are, let's have a little more fun. The casinos. I don't think we've mentioned casinos yet. That came in the budget, right? Or is that yet to come? Anyway, where are they going to be? Where's the latest conversations? Everybody seems to be lobbying to want a casino in their area.
You know, it's a weird process. It will require community input, but not from community boards. There was a very specific kind of outline included with the proposal that was like, oh, we'll need community input, but very specifically not community boards. And this group of people is going to be, you know, appointed by various political leaders in the state or in the communities rather. And, you know, since the expansion of the casino licenses to have a couple more downstate was part of the budget, there have been a couple of other things that have happened since then. So not a ton of conversation has kind of been focused around that quite yet. There will be some casinos, and there is a lot of lobbying going on, and there is a process in place to ensure that community voices are heard to at least some extent, but it's kind of taken a backseat to all the other nonsense happening, and not just nonsense, but tragedies in recent days as well. So not too much of an update there with casinos, just still a lot of lobbying, a lot of people who feel that there shouldn't be downstate casinos, or at least there shouldn't be more of them. Others who say that we are losing out on valuable revenue to, you know, like New Jersey and Connecticut, that people can just go over the border and go to Atlantic City, and you know, that why not have that here in New York? So it's an ongoing process to be sure, but you know, it's still very much up in the air. A lot of lobbying and very little concrete information right now.
Casinos, cannabis, to-go cocktails. It's crazy how much is done in Albany about like regulating vices and loosening up the rules around vices in New York. It's been an interesting time, I think, in these past few years.
Yes, online sports gambling, recreational marijuana, to-go cocktails, and you know, depending on what side of the aisle you fall on, discussions around decriminalizing sex work. Depends on the side of the aisle whether or not you consider that a vice, but you know, it could arguably be
now let's talk about
there too.
another arguable vice is the governor's addiction to the Buffalo Bills football team. And that was one of the biggest topics. You mentioned it at the top of the hour about the 600, I believe it's $650 of state money, and then 250. Anyway, do you know the numbers? How much money is going to the Buffalo Bills stadium? And then what are the politics around this? And is it being blown out of proportion, or is this a giveaway to the Buffalo Bills?
Well, it is about $1 billion just kind of to start. There is more that will go towards the stadium over the years, but about 850 million is going to be coming from the state, and the other, I guess, 150 million coming from localities, I believe. And it, again, kind of depends on who you ask, whether or not it's a giveaway. You know, plenty of people believe it is just a giveaway to the billionaire owners of Bills to keep them in Buffalo after they threatened to leave, when a lot of people felt like that was a loaded threat, that they weren't actually going to leave Buffalo. But I know that there have been some experts on, you know, sports stadiums and sports stadium funding who say that this deal is unusual in the way that it's been set up and the amount of money, but others say that it's really not, that it's not uncommon for state subsidies to, you know, go towards building sports stadiums that will generate money for the communities, ensure jobs. Now, I know that there's been some controversy about the fact that it's in technically a suburb of Buffalo as opposed to Buffalo proper. There are those who felt like it should have been in Buffalo proper, others who said that building the stadium in the actual city would have been a bad idea, probably would have displaced community members, most likely low-income communities, because they have the least amount of political power. But the other controversial thing with this as well, which might have been forgotten in everything that's happened, but the vast majority of the money that the state is paying towards this $1 billion is coming from the Seneca Nation after a very bold and controversial move on Governor Hochul's part. You know, as anyone who's been paying attention to, well, Western New York politics might be aware, there has been years of ongoing litigation about money that the Seneca Nation does or does not owe to the state in terms of casino revenue. And the state maintains that the Senecas must pay it, and the Senecas say, no, we don't. Courts have repeatedly kind of held the state's position, which is, you know, you can take that one way or the other. You can say that they have to pay it. The courts said that they've got to pay it. The other way is that the courts are not known for being particularly fair to Native people historically. But either way, it's been an ongoing issue. And
I took history class as well, and that is an agreed statement.
It's been an ongoing issue, and the Seneca Nation has kept this money in a secured account, but the Hochul administration said that since it wasn't specifically held in escrow, that they could ask the banks to freeze all of the Seneca Nation's assets, not just that, but everything, you know, money used for paychecks and you know, rental vouchers, you know, everything needed for basically shut down the government for a couple of days because they froze the assets and effectively forced the hands of the Seneca Nation to pay up this money. Now, debatable, it's, you know, there is debate on both sides of whether you think that this was warranted or not, but it came shortly before, I believe timing wise, it came shortly before the official announcement of the Bills deal. And then shortly after the announcement of the Bills deal, the governor said, don't worry, it's not coming from your tax dollars. We're going to use this newly acquired money from the Seneca Nation to pay for the state's portion of the stadium. So yet another controversy to add to that, in addition to the fact that the governor's husband, Bill Hochul, works for the company that runs concessions for the current Bill Stadium. And yet another controversy here. So there's a lot going on with the Buffalo Bills Stadium. It's not something that I think it played very well in Buffalo. Did not play super well basically anywhere else in the state. And you can just look at local newspaper editorials to see that that's the case. Times-Union, Daily News, Newsday. The only ones that really came out in support of it was the Buffalo News for, obvious reasons. Bills Mafia.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think that this issue has probably become even bigger and more prominent because I know Jumaane Williams and Ana Maria Archila have been just hammering the governor over it. Like they've been making like the anti-Buffalo Bills case to be elected governor. It's interesting. And also, look, I just want to say I'm so impressed with the level of knowledge you have with all the different, countervailing controversies and many aspects of the state budget and the budget deal, especially when it comes to the Buffalo Bills Stadium. So proud colleague moment. I want to turn to the Q&A briefly as we go to the first question from Mr. Scott Berlin, who is asking about the local rule for traffic cameras after and I quote, the Adonis debacle. There was some reporting that Adonis Rodriguez really rubbed lawmakers in Albany the wrong way with the way that he approached, he's the transportation commissioner, the way he approached them, by the way, about getting more control for speed cameras in New York City. I'll actually go first on this one, just because I just got out of a press conference with Speaker Adrienne Adams, and she was asked about this. Basically, is home rule for traffic cameras dead? And the answer was she wasn't sure. I mean, admittedly, this is confusing. It sounded to me like it's a standoff between the state and the city, and each of them thinks it's the other's turn to act and send a bill either down the Hudson River or up the Hudson River. But my understanding overall is that home rule for speed cameras is not dead, and there's still a possibility of this bill passing and New York City getting more control or total control over its own speed camera program, and potentially the ability to turn them on for 24 hours at a time, all day. I mean, we've seen some reporting that crashes and dangerous driving goes up when the speed cameras are off, because they're off from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. or something like that. So that's the latest from City Hall. Rebecca, what's the latest from Albany? Do you have anything more about speed cameras?
Yes, a little bit. I would agree it's definitely not off the table. I think that similar to mayoral control, it's something that an extension will probably happen, but Adams and the city probably won't get everything they wanted. So an extension seems more likely than an expansion. So, a straight extension here as opposed to a not straight extension with mayoral control, if maybe some tweaks to how that would play out. Certainly, but yes, certainly not off the table. It's definitely something that is an ongoing discussion among Albany lawmakers, but there is still, as you said, kind of this disagreement between state and city lawmakers about sort of who should be taking charge here. So we only got a couple scheduled session days left, so we're going to have an answer soon, one way or the other, but definitely not dead in the water just yet, but its future is uncertain.
Yeah, and I think the next city council meeting is on June 2nd, which is the last day of session. So my understanding is that means they're going to have to pass the bill the last day of session, and then Albany's going to have to act on it the last day of session, and it's all going to come down to the deadline. I might be wrong about that, because again, the going back and forth with the home rule is often complicated. But Rebecca, do you think it's safe to say that you might be staying late in Albany beyond the close of business on June 2nd?
I would say probably not, only because lawmakers really like getting home for the summer. But who knows? We already had a late budget, so anything's possible. It's Albany. I'm hoping that I don't have to stay late, but who knows? Lawmakers are generally pretty okay at wrapping things up in a fairly timely manner, which for the assembly means very early in the morning on June 3rd. But when it comes to end of session, lawmakers generally are pretty good at keeping to things fairly timely. And now the people are back in the Capitol. I believe that means it's the return of the State Senate Italian Ice end of session celebration that happens once they break for the year, after they pass everything they need to pass. They leave chamber. Last year, I think it was limited to just the lawmakers, but traditionally it's been in the Senate lobby, and anyone who's there can get some free iced treats. So hoping that'll come back. Don't want to see that delayed.
I believe my kindergarten class did the same thing, ice cream on the last day of our graduation. So I'm very happy that they are continuing the tradition up in Albany. We have another question from the audience. Daniel is wondering about the housing access voucher program. It was receiving some attention late in the budget process, but did not make it in. What's the latest on the housing access vouchers? And if not that, any more legislation on housing and tenants?
Yeah, so the housing access voucher program did fall out of the budget, as it sounds like you're aware. Both of the houses were included funding for it as part of their in-house budget bills, but the governor argued that it was too expensive. So in terms of the end of the year discussions happening right now, I haven't heard much chatter about the housing access voucher program, despite wide support for it among housing advocates and tenant activists. It's kind of part of a trend that, following the budget, there was a sense that it did not do much to address the state's homelessness and housing crisis. Similar with good cause eviction, to keep people in their homes for longer periods of time, not have them unnecessarily evicted. There's been a lot of attention around that in the last few days, the last few weeks and the last few days in particular. But that too seems unlikely to pass before the end of session. It's still very contentious, and you have real estate groups lobbying very hard against it. So when it comes to housing issues, aside from the good cause eviction, it does seem like there is not as much of a focus at the end of session. I wouldn't hold my breath about the housing access voucher program. It's another one of those contentious issues that, it's possible it could still come up before the end of the year, but funding is certainly always a question, and something like that, to do it outside of the budget, will require reallocation of funds. That is, not unheard of and not impossible, but certainly another complicating factor, especially as we're about to break for the year. So housing access voucher program, I think it's probably going to be another one of those things that's going to be that's going to be an issue again next year when lawmakers come back, as it has been for the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, there was just this big good cause eviction rally that ended up with some arrests and like the locking of the Capitol. I think you were locked out, right? Not in. What was your experience there the other day?
I finally learned from my mistakes, and started carrying around my Capitol ID with me everywhere, as you're supposed to. So I was fortunately not locked out, but several of my journalist colleagues, including a few who are based in Albany, were not allowed back into the building for about, it wasn't for terribly long, but it was for a little while. And for whatever reason, the state troopers did not know what was going on, or at least they weren't saying. I assumed it had to do with the cause rallies and protests. But they're like, we can't say, it's on lockdown, and everyone was very upset. But it's a return to normal, sort of, in Albany. For the past couple of years, it's been the Capitol has been closed off more securely and for a longer period of time than this about half an hour to hour long period But now we have activists and lobbyists flooding the halls again and taking up space and getting arrested. So it's business as usual again. So it was, annoying for some of us, and even for state lawmakers. I saw Luisa Pulveda was trying to get some people who were being honored on the Senate floor that day past security, and the state troopers were not letting him. And he was not a happy camper. He was calling people, trying to say they need to be on the Senate floor, and the state troopers can't let them through. They don't have state ID. They don't have a capital ID. So no special treatment for lawmakers, which was kind of nice to see.
I like the take. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, to go up, a 3-4 hour trip or something to
2.5
Albany. Are you speeding? My gosh, it seems a little fast. What role does that play, by the way? I mean, I asked you earlier about the role that journalists play, but do you get the impression that if something is going to be included in the budget or is going to be passed as a law, that there needs to be buses and train rides going up the Hudson to the Capitol, and there needs to be rallies? Or are there other ways that things get done? Or also, does that not help sometimes?
Well, certainly we have plenty of evidence of showing it not helping with some very contentious issues, very high profile issues. Take your pick. New York Health Act is one of them. Good cause eviction, another. But certainly, last year, no one was really allowed in the Capitol, but downstate protests still were able to see the Excluded Workers Fund included in the budget, for example. So, we didn't need busloads of people physically in the Capitol for that. It's still, a lot of advocacy, and, there's a multi-week hunger strike and lots of different rallies downstate and in other parts of the state, if not, directly in the Capitol. But, it certainly goes to show that you don't have to physically be in the Capitol to get big ticket items passed. It's certainly helpful to be able to knock on lawmakers' doors in the legislative office building and, have videos of Michael Benedetto promising to review good cause eviction with advocates, and then him not doing it. But it's not a necessity. It definitely helps, but not a necessity, and obviously does not work in every case. Now, whether it harms your efforts, it's hard to say. Never require going into the minds of the big movers and shakers, so it's hard to say. But don't think it really hurts unless you're really, really getting on the wrong side of powerful people.
Mm-hmm. Now, look, speaking of powerful people, I mean, for the average New Yorker, do you feel like they can not necessarily have a say in the budget, but do you feel like the average New Yorker is heard on the budget, or is this about whoever can afford the the lobbying firms to go up and work for them? Is the budget a closed off process to the people of New York, or is it an open and collaborative one?
I would not call it open and collaborative by any means, but we tend to get distracted. Well, maybe not distracted, but we tend to focus on the really big issues in the budget that impact large communities or the state as a whole, and getting lost in the mix is, very specific funding, very specific things for specific communities and parts of the state that you may never, ever go to. At the end of the day, lawmakers are trying to do what's best for their constituents and have things that they can go back to their district and say, I got XYZ for you. The same way that end of session, when you're looking at the bills that passed during the year, half of them are going to be things like renaming of X Bridge, naming of Y post office, tweak to municipal law for, Westchester County. There's a lot of, and even bills named after specific constituents who brought an issue to the attention of their local lawmaker. So, the budget is thousands of pages long. It contains a lot of different aspects, both legislative and monetary. And it's certainly having big bucks helps. Doesn't help all the time, as the real estate industry has large amounts of money, but they weren't able to get very many of their priorities in the budget this year. But it certainly helps to be able to hire lobbyists, but making calls to your local lawmakers, making sure they're aware of what local issues are important that they will fight for specifically. That's an important part of the budget process too. It's just not as sexy or high profile, because it really is very specific to the communities that these lawmakers represent. So the average New Yorker from a different part of the state would have no idea that someone from Saratoga might be getting something, and someone from Orchard Park, Orchard Park was in the news because they're getting a Buffalo Bills stadium, but or
Orchard
someone
Park
from
did all right. Yeah.
someone from like Onondaga is getting something. So yeah, so it's definitely not open, definitely not public, and certainly not the most collaborative process, but lawmakers ultimately are responsible to their constituents, and they will be fighting for whatever hyper-specific things that their fellow lawmakers might not care about in order to deliver for their people.
Mm-hmm. Now, just another reminder to everybody still watching, we'd love questions, we'd love Q&A, so throw some in. We've got a few minutes left. Look, we did have one submitted question about how much funding is going to go to addressing the growing homeless population. You talked a little bit about the Housing Access Voucher Program and the good cause eviction. I was just wondering if you could kind of expand on what about the actual, just like the grants that go into the state budget? I mean, so many local nonprofit providers and schools and everything else, they are getting thousands of dollars or millions of dollars through this budget, right? I mean, it's like a lifeline for some of these groups. Is that a part of this that is sometimes, I guess from my perspective, sometimes lost among the big ticket policy issues?
Certainly it can get lost in the mix. Certainly not if you're a nonprofit or a school or community group that is reliant on this funding. But I think that any member of those group will tell you that, you can give us lots of money and that will be helpful in the short term. That'll be helpful for the specific people that we can reach out to. But, lots of grants will not solve the problems that are institutional and, kind of ingrained into law and legislation and statute. So certainly, yes, nonprofits who don't get to see their state, or for that matter, city funding, will often have, serious cuts to the services that they can provide, but it would be the first one to say that, grants are great. It enables us to do the work that we need to do, but there should be broader fixes, legislative fixes, things that are more than just giving money to a nonprofit, because, at the end of the day, a lot of nonprofits are doing what they feel the government should be doing. So rather than sort of outsourcing that with grant money, a lot of these nonprofits are still saying, and community groups and whatnot are saying, this is great, but let's pass something comprehensive that will have more than just, the limited reach that we can have, or that will benefit all the groups across the state equally, or just as much or more, that, might not be able to do as much as they can with the amount of money that they have.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've been up to Albany a good number of times, but I haven't been up in a few years now. And my understanding is that the Dunkin' Donuts in the Capitol is the most important location in state government. That is where things happen. Can you explain the Capitol Dunkin' to our listeners?
The Capitol Dunkin' is just about the only place that you can, it's the only place in Capitol proper where you can get food or beverages that is not a vending machine. There are some things in the concourse. The Capitol is connected to the Legislative Office Building, which is where most lawmakers have their offices. And they're connected underground by a concourse, and there's some, I've never actually been, I've never actually gotten food there, but there's, one or two kind of cafeteria, marketplace kind of places down there. But the Capitol Dunkin' is a much beloved institution. If you're in there sometime between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., you can probably catch Carl Hasty getting his morning orange juice. Whenever the Capitol Dunkin' is closed, it is big news. People are mourning on Twitter. It is, the Capitol really does run on Dunkin'. It is an essential part of the functioning of the state capitol. And if it were to ever close, I would personally begin to cry.
Well said. Well said. Well, look, that's all I have, Rebecca. I want to just say that you're an expert on this. I've learned a lot. This has been really wonderful, and I'm thankful to ABNY for giving me the opportunity to ask you questions and for you to answer them.
I am very thankful as well. Thank you for having us both on, and thank you for the opportunity to allow me to force my knowledge onto Jeff, since he obviously has not been reading my stories. Otherwise, he would know this.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca and Jeff, for today's insightful discussion. And thank you to our audience members for joining us. I hope you were all able to take away as much knowledge about our state budget as I did. You guys are really an encyclopedia of knowledge, and ABNY is very lucky to have you. And with that, we will conclude today's session. We hope to see you all in next week's ABNY YP Associates launch celebration and open house. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again.